How is it what you know, what you have learned, how you react, how you relate, how you are being seen? I have been here before. There is a deep recollection of longing, of a romance. The universe that we live in has only 3 spatial dimensions. We are limited to length, width, and height, and we can only travel along 3 perpendicular paths. Imagine a point in space. A point is 0-dimensional. It has no width, length, or height, and is infinitely small. Every point is exactly the same and has the same measurements. It has no dimension. Take the point and extrude it in any direction. You create a line segment. All the line segments are one-dimensional. If you expanded the line infinitely, it will cover one-dimensional space. We are now going to enter the 2nd dimension. Now take the line segment and extrude it in any direction that is perpendicular to the 1st direction, creating a square. All squares are 2-dimensional. All of the edges are the same length. If you expanded the square infinitely, it would cover 2-dimensional space. Take the non-infinite square and extrude it in a 3rd direction, perpendicular to both of the 2 first directions, creating a cube. All cubes are 3-dimensional. All of the edges within a single cube are the same length. If you expand the cube infinitely in all directions, it will cover 3-dimensional space. We are in the 3rd dimension. Now from here, let's step into the 4th dimension. The 4th dimension is all space that one can get by traveling in one direction perpendicular to the 3-dimensional space. You can view the extrusion of the entire cube into inner or parallel projections in many proportions. In public discussion, a growing concern about the dissipation of political imagination and inability to envisage alternative futures has been articulated over the recent decades. Elements for imagining alternative social formations and futures seem restricted at this current conjuncture. The question of alternative is, however, currently particularly acute as the climate emergency, growing social inequalities, pandemics, transformation of work, and crisis of democracy push us to search for the prerequisites for ecologically and socially sustainable societies. On the one hand, the contemporary crises give rise to growing anxiety, dystopias, and polarization of views. But on the other hand, they also animate the process of imagining alternative worlds and making living utopias here and now. Art is one of the pivotal areas in which alternatives are imagined and performed. This is a journey through something that I expect to see at some point, but it can only be unleashed once one engages with it wholeheartedly. Although beginnings always have the beginning in itself, like a never-ending story, the story lies in the source that's the narrator, and if his plunge is drenched with care and love, you won't ever have to fear ends, and it will be complete and not lacking anything. May that be your faith and mine. When you came here, you walked and stand still here. Do you remember where you came from? When I arrived, you thanked me, embraced me like none ever did before, and said, "I'm so glad you came here." The space had 5 tables in a U shape in the middle of the space. Cozy lighting and lavender-colored tablecloth with beautiful flowers and plants, and the walls were decorated with 5 old textile pieces. The people were sitting at the tables, and there were name cards to each. I was sitting at the short end of the U so that everyone could see me from whatever position, and my husband was sitting right next to me. I met all of you at the door. I invited you in, I welcomed you into, I greeted you, I said something to each of you. I was telling about my journey and how I got here. Then, for seemingly no reason, this part became messy. I stumbled over my words, struggling to find a way to continue. I felt lost, vulnerable, uncomfortable. I was aware of the seemingly incoherent and unknowing where this deal was gonna go. I tried with all my might to get back on track. I felt sinking deep. There I was, unable to speak almost, with the group watching and listening. But I was full of confidence in this tumbling, and there was an unexpected lightness and joy, or an unusual determinacy to get going. I knew I was right, yet it seemed highly unlikely this is meant to happen. I remembered that I asked people for help to get me on my way. Whilst two persons shared experiences of me and Skogen, I could catch breath, gather my thoughts, and when they were done sharing, I knew I could finish the tale, albeit in the middle and far from the actual end of where the tale logically was aimed to end. No conclusion or a clever comment. There it was, and I said, "Now we can eat." And we ate. And the food was delicious, and the cake as well, and all talked and stayed and had a very nice time. In this exact bit, where I was off script, letting go of any control, any security, any grip, any predefined path, I knew I reached the root, the heart of the place. And it wasn't predictable, and it wasn't smooth laying bare the roots, and it was still in a way invisible, but I went into it, deep hidden in the soil, but I felt it. Then I was suddenly discovering the originating movement, a moment at the core. I remembered that I said once that I felt like time traveling or some sort of crossing dimensions. Because of the repetition of movement, it felt like forking paths of possibilities. Instead of one way to move, I suddenly had duplicated it, and it kept multiplying. Was it opening doors into rooms I have never entered before? Was it making new pathways into my brain? It is absolutely thrilling to experience how a seemingly simple act like this holds so much consecration of power, overcoming inner obstacles and fears. I notice the effect on me and on my surroundings. It expands and makes so much more possible, and above all, it liberates. It sets free from the ties that binds us and keeps us moored to a hidden version who we are as human beings. The act of stretching oneself by trust and faith is what it means to be living in the land beyond, in the place we are dreaming of. It's an act of faith, not reason.
Part 6. Blind spots. Today we will be resting on our back. So find a nice place where you can lie down comfortably with your arms alongside you on the floor and your legs long and slightly spread. And as you're resting on your back, what do you observe in yourself? Do you notice familiar things? Or do you look for familiar things? Is there some place or sensation in yourself that you can use as a measure for how you are today? For example, which parts of you are resting on the floor and which parts are not? Or maybe, how are you breathing today? Or maybe you notice the degree of discomfort you have in a place. Do you have a habit of assessing yourself? And what else can you notice? Can you let your attention wander? And can you notice your blind spots? Try this. Find a place you can sense or feel clearly, and very slowly start to move away from it in some direction. And what's the next place you start to sense? Do you sense it less? And at some point it gets more clear again. Now start to make your way back to the first cleared spot. It's often in between two clear points that we get lost sometimes. Or we jump over it because we cannot sense it. Find another place and do the same thing. So find this place you can sense very clearly, and very slowly start to move away from it in any direction. Notice what the next place you start to sense feels like, and notice if you sense it less. And then go until you find a point that is more clear again. And then from that point, go back to the first spot. And see, how does the quality of your sensing change as you're doing this? And then try it again from a third place. Wander from there and see what happens. And then go until you arrive again at a more clear place. And slowly wander back to the first spot. We can't see or find the blind spot, but we can listen, and maybe in the listening, something starts to emerge in time. And if you like, you can find a fourth spot and just continue until you think, yeah, okay, this is it for today. And you've noticed changes in sensing. Thanks for joining me today. I see you next time.